David, good morning. How are you, man?
I'm good, Adam. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, back for another episode of the podcast. Adam and David from RevSearch. And real quick, if you're a company out there, whether you're a RevOps leader, a CRO, CEO, someone in PE, we put together a resource that we'd love for you to grab. It's a RevOps readiness assessment. It's a PDF that you can download from our website. You can go to revsearch.io/readiness to grab a free copy of that. Welcome to the podcast. We got a great guest. David, why don't you tee that up a little bit for us?
Yeah, we've got Justin Edwards on the podcast today. Really excited to have you on, Justin. Justin works over at Mercato, private equity firm. He's a friend of ours. We've been in touch with him for a while. We've had really great conversations, and they're doing incredible work over there with a group of really awesome companies. Justin, I'm going to kick it over to you. Give us a little bit of background on yourself, tee it up, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah, welcome, Justin.
Welcome.
Thank you. I haven't gotten that assessment, so you want to send me the
link? Yes, we will make sure
you
you get a copy of the assessment.
We're done here.
Yep, we'll send it over to you.
I want to do the revenue assessment link. Thanks, David. Yeah, we've been in touch for a couple of years now. We talk shop, and basically that's what we do. We're revenue operations people. I joined Mercato in 2017, and since we have 21 investments that I've been working with, and 6 have exited. And so we've got quite a few that are still active that we're working through different phases through. When we make an investment, we have a 100-day plan, and then we identify low-hanging fruit, and we deploy and make optimizations to get the biggest bang for the buck in our hold period. And then we have the large majority of our companies are in the growth phase, and then we have a harvest phase. So I've been doing this for going on 7 years. Previous to that, I was at Inside Sales, Oracle, Merit, CX, and Adobe, which are some of the faster growing companies. At Adobe, the 500 million revenue playbook was deployed, and it was Omniture, which was acquired by Adobe for 1.7 billion. Which was a really great experience to be a part of that whole motion. And then Merit CX is a $200 million voice of customer company. And I was running all of global sales development. Oracle was the massive $49 billion complex enterprise sales transaction. Got a glimpse of what inefficient looks like. And at Inside Sales, I joined the team at 20 million, and we grew that to 75 million. And basically was a sales leader for 3 of the most productive regions and territories for Inside Sales. So I have a background, 2 degrees from Brigham Young University, and looking forward to talking revenue, because that's what I do all day.
Yeah, that's great, man. We are so excited to have you here on the podcast. We had a call a few weeks ago, and we were talking a little bit about what we wanted to cover today in our chat. And the reality is that none of us have a crystal ball, right? None of us know exactly what the future is going to hold. And if we look back over the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, think about what we've experienced from an economy standpoint. From late teens of the 2000s, right? We had just immense growth, and then we had the pandemic, and then we had this spike that happened in 21, 22, and then last year, like nothing was happening on the economy side. And then we have all these signals even coming into this year, and some of those signals haven't quite panned out the way that we all expected. And so the reality is that there's so many things that are just outside of our control, things that we have to learn to react to and adapt to. However, what I love about the conversation we're going to have today is that there are things that we have control over as organizations. And, really the way that you set that up, Justin, you call them these strategic bets that organizations can make where they have either most or all of the control. And so the conversation today is really around, what are those things? What do they look like? How do these companies make these strategic bets? And so we just want to share some insights and thoughts around that.
The need for efficiency has never been greater in RevOps. We have smaller budgets, longer sales cycles. So this is very timely conversation. You mentioned the growth is kind of stalled out a little bit, but going back to even 22, we were at a 60% growth rate across the board.
Yeah.
And now as we sit today, we're around 8%.
Yeah.
So we've lost 50 points in growth. And what that actually feels like is it doesn't feel good when you're a leader and you're looking at your numbers.
Right.
So
Right.
it makes a lot of sense to be thinking about how am I going to close the gap, because everybody's got the number that they've been given, whether you're a top down or a bottoms up kind of forecasting organization. You're handed a number and then you're going to actually see a way to a certain point. But most of the leaders that I'm talking to today, they can't, there's a gap. And sometimes it's large and sometimes it's small, but there's still a gap. And so you have to be thinking about ways to be able to get to your number, because we can't say, hey, we're going to have a lower number because the budgets were cut. That's just not an option,
Right.
for revenue teams. So it's a challenge out there.
Sure. Yeah.
It's easy to grow in an up market, but the reality is there's an opportunity for steadiness even in the midst of up or down, right? This volatility. There's things we can do as an organization. We can target areas for improvement to get to this place of consistency and ultimately sustainable growth, right? And that's what I love about what you guys do, Justin, and something that we talk about a lot is we don't just want to grow at all cost, right? And so, yeah, let's get into it. Let's start unpacking some of these strategic bets. The first area that we talked about was go-to-market fit. Let's start there. Help us unpack that a little bit. How can we make some strategic bets there?
Well, so I really it resonates with me that you actually can have sustainable growth. And what you hit on is super important, this idea of efficiency in tough times, because we're all being asked to do more with less. And when you look at just basic metrics like revenue per full-time employee, we're at 268. That's highly efficient. But what that means is we're doing more with less, fewer people. And so when you look at our portfolio, I mentioned that the average is 8%. It's 8.4% growth rate across the board for SaaS companies. When you look at our portfolio, we've achieved a 42% growth rate as we sit today. And I attribute that to process adherence and some of these fundamental things that are breaking down in the bad economy. Like we're still in a data silo and process silo era, and scaling and streamlining RevOps is still not widely known, and measuring and analyzing revenue performance isn't where it needs to be. And so when you look at go-to-market fit, you're really kind of talking about three different things: your pipeline health, you're optimizing your sales funnel, and really when you're optimizing your sales funnel, you're optimizing your sales team, because ultimately, as much as we want to talk about technology, it's still people that are driving and flipping switches and using prompt engineering to extract value from ChatGPT and Claude, which I don't know if you guys saw recently, but Claude is outperforming in all the major categories of a benchmark that just recently came out.
Wow.
In terms of accuracy and speed and
Right.
and flexibility in responses. And so, whereas in the past we were talking about ChatGPT for efficiency, now it's Claude, and now, here's an idea that we have a process improvement that we need to actually make today. It's not weeks, it's not months, it's like daily kind of monitoring what's happening. And so it's the people ultimately that are driving these switches and flipping them. And then the revenue operations piece of it is just your standard systems and automation. And we've talked about this, David, for a long time, and Adam too. Like the idea that we're automating some inefficient processes and all we're doing is rapidly getting to failure is a head scratcher. And we keep kind of pushing a button and expecting different results. So when you talk about making a strategic bet on your go-to-market fit, that's an important element, because if you're using what worked yesterday, it's not necessarily going to work today or tomorrow. And if you don't have a built-in process to evaluate, to monitor, to measure, to manage, to analyze, and then make iterative improvements, then you're going to be stuck in repeating history, which right now across the board, I see, just looking at the metrics, people are a little bit stalled in what they're trying to, from a growth perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I think of when you talk about this is that I see the organizations that are doing this best are segmenting their sales, segmenting what they're doing in different ways so they can get the data points on each one of those rather than looking at everything in a whole, right? So I think about an organization I was a part of before. We specifically left some markets not because there wasn't opportunity there, but because it wasn't the right opportunity for us. We weren't positioned for whatever reason to really take that opportunity and win on it. And then we doubled down in other areas. But the difference between maybe a more mature or a more developed go-to-market function is one that has done a good job of segmenting all their pipeline, all of the work that they do into these different types of whatever categories we want to call them, and then scrutinize each one of those. And in the conversation we had with you before, we talked about, look to go upstream, look for opportunities where you can really grow your business and go away from ones where there might be challenge. They're enticing sometimes, right? But you've got to really scrutinize that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you look at like the how to do it element. So we all know the why. It's like, because things aren't working. And in venture land, highly funded companies that aren't profitable and aren't successful are called zombies, right? And so they've been funded, they've got runway, but at the end of the day, there's a cliff. And they're going and getting an additional round of funding if you don't have fundamentals down, is going to be very, very difficult, and it's going to be painful, because you're going to have to give up ownership, and in the form of dilution. And so you have to build into your processes. One of the things that we talked about last November to all of our portfolio companies is this idea that no longer can you have a yearly planning session. It needs to be at least biannual. Like, you have to have a mid-year check-in to make sure that things are working, that at the beginning of the year you had all of these assumptions and aspirations, but things happen, markets happen, customers shift.
Both outside and inside. And just look at the changes that we've had in the last 4 or 5 years. If you're just only doing that once a year, it's just not enough.
Right. Yeah. And if you have a mentality of like, okay, we're going to keep doing what's working, but we actually need incrementally something more, then you're going to be looking at segments. I think you bring up a great point. It's like looking at the customer bases that are less profitable. Salesforce has that early example in 2005 when they were churning 8% of their customer base per month. And you multiply that by 12 months, that's almost the entire customer base in a year. And that's where customer success as a function was born. Dempsey was the person that brought that to Mark Benioff. And so when you look at the economic conditions and the different things that are happening, you have to be able to respond. And so looking at segments is actually a strategic bet that you need to be doing all the time, but really you need to be doing it now. And I would start like looking at your high churn. And we had a company that I was working with that on the low end of the market, they had a high churn rate. And so, like you said, moving up market might be a good bet, right? So stop selling and servicing very small businesses and move into the SMB or the mid-market as a segment. That's scary because you're walking away from revenue, but you have to understand what revenue you're walking into. And you do that through first identifying the possible bet. You look at your churn, you test and validate, you walk into it. You don't just go jumping into it because, the executives said that we need to be looking at more profitable segments. As operators, we need to kind of test our way into these things. And then you need to plan for the ripple effects and really kind of double in and pull in some things there. From Sean Lane is someone that I invited to my summit last November. and he talked about moving up market at Drift, and he described a lot of these things that they as a company had to kind of double down and really figure out, are we going to walk away from the very, very small incremental revenue pieces at the low end? And how do you do it? You measure gross and net retention for the different ranges, and then you anticipate and you build into your model the implications of what that could potentially be. And you need to make sure that weighted, that when you're subtracting some, in one segment, you're actually adding in another. And then the enablement pieces need to be in place from an operational standpoint. So, actually getting the changes implemented and deployed, and then the sales teams actually enabled, and really kind of planning for that shift. And then also you have to set up the systems. So this is kind of like a full circle strategic bet. You have to actually start routing leads, enriching data that you might need that could be, indicators of a good fit within a certain segment, like let's just say mid-market. You got to adjust your compensation because mid-market reps make more than very small business SMB reps do. And you kind of make all of these adjustments along the way to make sure that your strategic bet, it is a bet because it's not 100%, but you're not going into it blindly.
Sure. And that's why it's strategic, right? You've got an idea of, okay, it's not guaranteed, there is some risk involved in it, but it's, you've done the homework. It's not just a blind bet. You've done your strategic work to say, if we take this action, it's predictive and probable that I'll get this outcome. Not guaranteed, but probable. So yeah, I love that.
Another point to make on this is, when I hear you talking about all these things, is I want to make a note here and say to all the RevOps leaders listening, the difference between good and great in RevOps is everything you're describing here is actually unlocking those true, diagnosing, getting to the root cause of where's the breakdown, where are the bottlenecks, what are the opportunities, what opportunities have the biggest ROI, right? When looking at a market, looking at segments, everything. That's where this leader can differentiate, really level up. And that's what we need. We need more leaders that can go in, diagnose, bring those insight, and then execute that system, right? Coming back full circle, that system. But it really starts with looking at the entire customer journey and figuring out what are we doing and dialing into the biggest ROI, data points and drilling down and saying, and modeling out, right? The entire modeling piece and saying, hey, if we go this direction, this could be an assumption here based on historical, based on existing, right? Looking at the data. So if RevOps leaders are listening, this is your differentiator, right? You're bringing these golden nuggets for growth to the table, to the C-suite. So yeah, it's great.
I would say test your way into it.
Yeah.
Don't be flipping things over and starting fires all over the place. You don't
Right.
want to do that to yourself.
Right.
And then you want to also go to whoever you're reporting to. Depends on your organization, and within the 21 companies, we've had wild configurations of different things functionally, just because of the talent that you have. And you're gonna, as a leader, gonna need to assess the talent that you have and the talent that are reporting into you, and assess skills and different things. So that kind of leads us into another strategic bet.
So another strategic bet that you talked about was betting on your people. And you mentioned a few minutes ago, just automating inefficiency, how that's problematic, right? How regardless of what systems and tools you have in place, there's still people behind much or most of that. And so what do you mean by making the strategic bet on people? What does that look like?
Well, the one thing that comes to mind is I'm a person that really loves that loyalty element to the team that's actually bought into the vision. And so you're actually finding people within your organization to kind of bring up. Hire from within is I think a very scalable strategy. for many reasons, and that can be a whole topic in and of itself. But a story comes to mind of an Olympic horse named Fred, who was basically had 60 race starts and no wins. And I met this horse back in the 80s. It was acquired after 60 race starts and no wins for 25K. And his peers were going for about 250K. And this horse was transformed, and I saw it. Literally, this is a personal experience, through the right training and the right positioning and the right coach, and ended up changing functions. So went from racehorsing to Grand Prix jumping of
Wow.
all sports,
Yeah.
and ended up winning 30 Grand Prix, 9 in 1 year, and 4 Olympic gold medals.
Wow.
A horse that was actually on its last legs,
Literally.
was revived through
Yeah.
coaching and just being in the right spot. So we always talk about, having the right people in the right seats on the bus, getting people on the bus and making sure that they have the vision is super important, but making sure they're sitting in the right seat. And, we talk about this, but what does it actually mean? It means maybe looking at someone that has potential that maybe isn't a racehorse, and there could be some opportunity within the team. David, you were talking about modeling, and that's going to be a different skill set than someone who's writing triggers within Salesforce and reporting, or maybe it's the same person that has that skill set, and I would say that they would be very talented. But looking and assessing it, your people, and making sure that what skills do you need, what skills do you have, and then aligning and going and getting those skills. If it's not readily available in the market, then you need to take your existing team and retrain them. You can't just say, I don't have the skill set, and sit back. And this is this idea that in this economy, you have to actually be looking at your employees and helping them get to where they want to go. And that takes investment. And so that's the strategic bet for 2024, and the challenge for all the leaders that are listening to the podcast is identify these people, these Freds in your organizations, and put the right coaching, but understand what skills you need in the organization. And if it's as easy as going and hiring it, if it's readily available in the market, then go do that and reassign that person. But if it's not, and the person wants to, you create this environment so that you can actually get the skill that you need that's not readily available in the marketplace. And that's true competitive advantage. So if you're developing skills within your organization, you're coming up with the plans and the modeling to the executive team and saying, this is the strategic segment we need to go after based on these things that we've analyzed. That's the spot you want to be as a leader.
It also changes the culture, of the organization, right? I think this people, a lot of companies want to believe they're people first, but it takes making these types of decisions to change the game. Instead of just let's turn everybody over and hire a bunch of new people. So I think it shows who you are, that you truly are people first. You're looking at all your options. You're looking inside the organization, and that's a big move.
Yeah, I think about some of the companies that we've worked with, David, and there's a few that come to mind where they've grown so well over the time, and we get brought in and we help them maybe place a real high level leader. And one of the distinguishing factors about those organizations is that it's not just lip service to, we care about people, we take care of our people, but you literally see it through the prep leading up to hiring somebody, the entire interviewing process, the intentionality of onboarding that person, where they see career path for that person down the line. I mean, it's so different than some other folks that we might work with or that we'll hear talk about this, and they're just kind of like, we just need a body in here who has done RevOps at some point, and they're quick to churn those people. And it's just a different scenario.
It's transactional.
Yeah, very transactional.
Very transactional.
Yeah.
It's limiting too, because the Gallup poll, talent over experience, outperforms at 9 months. And so what does that mean? Well, you hire someone at month 0, and they come in and they're X more productive than a person that doesn't have that experience. But the research that they've done shows that at 9 months, there's an exponential growth in the talent over experience. And the experience bar is relatively flat. So your productivity is all front loaded. But if you can keep someone in seat that's talented multiple years, the productivity curve goes off the charts. Like you can't, I mean, I couldn't show you a slide right now that would show what is the potential of someone that has a lot of talent. That's hard to do because you need to have a very tight coaching program. You need to understand your business really well. You need to have your systems and processes nailed down and being in a test mode, and then identifying the skills that you actually need. And then you can hire someone that's talented based on you guys know very well, structured interviews, and making sure that all of the interviewers are aligned, and that there's not a lot of creativity in the hiring process as it relates to asking the same questions. Because it's amazing at how many executives are walking around thinking that they have this silver bullet in hiring, and they're still, when you look at the numbers, 50% good. So they're half the time they get it right and half the time they get it wrong. So you might as well just flip a coin.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's a great conversation talking about the people. And I think that's a very important strategic bet going into just where we are.
It's huge.
I want to dive into one more because I think we've got time to maybe jump into one more. And it's the idea of this strategic bet around playbooks. And I loved what you said, this idea of a Goldilocks playbook. And what do you mean by that when you say a Goldilocks playbook?
Well, everyone thinks they can cut and paste a playbook that was successful in the past for them, and I think that there's a lot of reasons why you would want to think that, and why I thought that in the past. And as I've kind of been, I've seen hundreds of playbooks, probably thousands. At a certain point, it was in our sales motion at Inside Sales, where we went in and we identified what the sales motion was, and we looked for inefficiencies, and magically the sales team would come up with a reason why they would want to buy Inside Sales. But it was an assessment of sorts, and you looked at the current state and you looked at the future state, and then you identified milestones to get to that future state, which were high impact, low cost propositions. And playbooks is one of these things where they're highly available, but they're not relevant in a lot of cases. And I think where you actually start to see, growth opportunities within actually implementing a playbook is on the edge cases. You have to evaluate your team structure. When you think about playbooks, you have to identify the way that the customer wants to buy from you. Because you don't want to stick them through a sales cycle that you read from a book, and there's plenty of them, and your customers through that cycle, and then all of a sudden you realize they don't really like it, or they never liked it, and therein lies an inefficient process. And you've just identified that because you weren't willing to look at the way your unique situation, the skill set that you have, the edge cases that your particular solution or industry brings to the table. And so Goldilocks is just about the right revenue motion. And you can certainly use and replicate, playbooks, and you don't have to repeat everything, but there is this idea that you definitely make it custom.
I mean, looking at the experience that your customer needs based on what your company looks like, and maybe taking something else as a framework or a starting point, but then really making it just right for your organization. And the companies that do that benefit the most from it. I mean, it's no different than I think about when we're working on a job with a search with somebody, and they say, "Hey, do you have a JD that you can send us for this role?" And we think, well, I can share with you some best practices of what this role should look like within your organization. But if those companies don't take the time to really say, what exactly do we need in this person in this role today, right now, the next 30 days, the next 60 days, the next year, when they don't take the time for that, it becomes more challenging to find the Goldilocks for them, the right fit for them exactly. And that really makes all the difference.
Yeah. And it's the old adage that linear functions don't work today,
Yeah.
which in the past they did. When you added $2 in the top of the funnel, you wanted $2 out of the funnel. And it was like an X plus B kind of equation and function. And playbooks help you, and why they're strategic. And this is another strategic bet, but we won't dive too deep into it. But it's the exponential pieces of adding in $1 and getting 2 out. And so you have a 2x factor with something like a playbook that optimizes for sales meetings, for example, based on a customer that wants to try before they buy. And also that you have a 60% conversion rate if you can get them to demo. And so what does that mean for pre-demo activities is you better get them on that call. And so you add in layering text functionality within the sales team, and you layer in some AI automation, which everybody needs to be talking about AI. A lot of people are talking about it. Let me rephrase that. Everybody needs to be implementing AI as a strategy, as a workflow disruptor. And so that's another way to get exponential growth within one specific segment of a playbook or stage in a sales funnel. And you'll find that, AI can kind of automate some things for you, like sales coaching, team individuals, transcripts, feedback and training in real time. A lot of things that Gong are providing, but actually can be one-on-one with GPT. And that's another, great kind of conversation to be having, is what are the tools? Because right now seats are being reduced, right? So costs in organizations, budgets have been reduced. And so you have to look at your shelfware. There's an inefficiency right there in what's being adopted and what wasn't, and what was contracted 2 years ago that's not being used needs to be cut out of the contract. And there's just a lot of low-hanging fruit. So I think the general consensus for our portfolio companies at this point in the game is really kind of planning for growth and really identifying what your 6-month target is. And I'm challenging people to do it quarterly, and then optimizing and executing on exponential growth within the funnel, and then testing and measuring your strategic bets and like kind of easing into it. And that way, you have the best of both worlds, where you have your revenue that you're expecting, but then you're also incrementally adding revenue, that's what exactly everybody needs right now.
Yeah. I everything you both just said, to me, what I keep thinking about is we all want the easy road. All these companies, we all want the easy road, right? But there isn't really an easy road. So we look to, companies are looking to AI, they're looking to playbooks, viral things that are coming out, right? Quick growth hacks. But the reality is it's all about customization based on your business, based on your customer. So really it's knowing your customer and then looking inside, and what you said, which is really great, testing over and over again. There's new things hitting the market, new tools, ways to augment, ways to drive efficiency, through things like AI. But there's not a one solution to fix it all. There's not an easy path, but there is a path of testing, a path of just evaluating many things and adapting them in a custom way to your business. That's kind of the point that I'm taking home from everything you're saying. It's awesome.
That's right. I think to drive the nail into the piece of wood.
Yeah.
Because I don't like coughing. That's
no, we don't want to talk about that. But to really hang, the nail to hang everything on.
It's delivering value.
Yeah.
And I have these conversations all the time. Good friend of mine, Greg Danes, the churn doctor, he says something that just resonates with me so much. And it's happy customers are leaving every day. Happy customers will leave you. And if you look at NPS and the correlation between a 10 and a 9, which is promoter score,
Yep.
or a detractor score,
Yep.
1, 2, if you look at those and then everybody in the middle, there's the same churn rate. across the board of all scores.
Wow.
So what's that telling us? And it really just is impactful to think about that happy customers, a 10 will leave you if you're not delivering value.
Adding value. Yeah.
And so your go-to-market motion has to be delivering value, getting it in front of the customer and showing them the value that you're delivering. And if you aren't doing that, I think it's going to be very rocky road in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think my biggest takeaway, what I love about this is that kind of how we set up the whole beginning of it is that there are things that are outside of our control, but everything you talked about today are things that anybody in any organization, anywhere in the world can say, today, I'm going to start looking at how we can assess each of these different things, how we can assess our go-to-market fit, our people, exponential growth, playbooks. You talked about AI. We can go and assess those today and begin making well-placed strategic bets and see success, not overnight, not next day, not quick wins, but see the right sustainable growth that we're looking for if you'll just take the opportunity to do this within your organization. So it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate the insights that you've shared here, Justin, specifically on how you guys are seeing it happen within the companies that you guys are a part of.
Really enjoy working with you guys anytime. Enjoyed the conversation as well.
Yeah.
Thanks
awesome.
for having me.
Yeah,
Thanks.
for sure. So if you guys want to check out Justin, connect
Yeah.
with him, find him on LinkedIn, Justin
Drop him a
Edwards.
note.
Yeah, drop him a note. I'm sure he'll be happy to have a few more connections and meet a few more people and maybe even share little insights that he's got there. So, yeah,
That's right. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
awesome.
Close it out.
Thanks, Justin.